Right now, somewhere in a parking lot, there's a car sitting under the sun with a problem nobody can see. The oil was changed 3 months ago. The tires were rotated last spring. From the outside, the car looks maintained. From the inside, it feels fine. But under the hood, in a small translucent reservoir near the firewall, there's a fluid that has been quietly absorbing moisture from the air every single day since the last time anyone thought about it, which for most cars on the road right now was never. That fluid is responsible for stopping the car, and almost nobody checks it. Here's what most drivers don't know about how their brakes actually work. When you press the pedal, you're not pulling a cable. You're not directly squeezing anything. You're pressurizing a column of liquid, brake fluid, that runs from a cylinder near your foot through steel lines and rubber hoses to the calipers at each wheel. The caliper takes that pressure and converts it into mechanical force against the rotor. The rotor slows, the wheel stops. The reason this works is that liquid doesn't compress. Press on it and the force transmits instantly, completely, to wherever the line ends. That's why a firm pedal feels firm. That's why you can turn the modest pressure of your foot into thousands of pounds of clamping force. Now picture something else. Picture vapor inside that line instead of liquid. Vapor compresses. Press on it and it absorbs the force. The pedal travels further. Response comes later. And at the far end of that scenario, the scenario most drivers never imagine until they're in it, the pedal goes to the floor. Not because anything broke, because the fluid changed state. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the environment, by design actually, because absorbing moisture is safer than letting it pool in the system, where it would corrode the calipers, the master cylinder, the steel lines. The fluid pulls the water in and holds it. The trade-off is that as moisture content rises, the boiling point drops. Think about what that means in practice. Fresh DOT3 fluid, the specification in most North American vehicles, has a dry boiling point of 401 degrees Fahrenheit. That's with no moisture. After 12 months in a normal braking system, moisture absorption brings the wet boiling point down to around 284 degrees. That's a drop of 117 degrees. The chemistry isn't complicated. The consequences are. A brake engineer who spent 16 years working on hydraulic systems for a Tier 1 automotive supplier, the kind of company whose name you've never seen because they supply automakers, not consumers, described it like this. Brake fade from overheated fluid is not a race car problem. It happens to normal people in normal cars who haven't changed their fluid and then find themselves braking harder than usual. The conditions don't have to be extreme. They just have to be different than the conditions the car sees on a normal Tuesday. Different than a normal Tuesday. That's worth sitting with. Because most people never brake hard on a normal Tuesday. They brake hard on a mountain road they drove once, on a highway where traffic suddenly stopped, on a steep parking structure ramp they weren't expecting, on the one day, the one moment when the system gets tested beyond what daily commuting asks of it. That's when the fluid's condition becomes the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. There's a test for this. It's simple, it's fast, and almost nobody does it. A brake fluid test strip, available at AutoZone, O'Reilly, Napa, any auto parts store, costs about $3. You open the brake fluid reservoir cap, dip the strip for 30 seconds, compare the color to the chart on the package. The strip measures copper content in the fluid, which correlates with moisture absorption and additive degradation. A refractometer, slightly more expensive at $20 to $30, reads moisture content directly as a percentage. That's it. That's the whole test. Here's what a service writer at an independent shop in Michigan told me. 12 years in the business, the kind of shop where the same families have been coming since the owner's father ran it. I ask customers when their brake fluid was last changed. Almost nobody knows. Most of them look at me like I asked them a question in a different language. He tests it during every oil change now. Not because the shop makes significant money on brake fluid flushes.
Because twice in his career, he's had customers come back after a close call on a long downhill, and he's never wanted to make that phone call. Picture him at the counter, test strip in hand, translating a 30-second result into a conversation most drivers have never had. That conversation costs $3.
Most shops don't offer this test proactively. Not because it's difficult. It takes less time than checking tire pressure. The honest reason is simpler than that. A brake fluid flush takes 30 to 40 minutes and uses $20 of fluid. On a service day where a shop has 8 cars booked for oil changes, tire rotations, and alignment checks, a fluid test that might generate a low-margin service is not the first thing on the mental checklist. It's not negligence. It's incentives. The same incentives that mean the oil change sticker gets placed every time and the brake fluid reservoir goes unexamined every time, and the driver leaves with the confidence of someone who just had their car serviced, which is technically true and also slightly incomplete. The manufacturer recommendation is almost universally 2 years or 24 months, regardless of mileage. That part surprises people because we're used to thinking in miles: oil at 10,000, tires at 50,000, filters at 15,000. The calendar feels less precise, less mechanical, less like something engineers would specify. But moisture absorption is time-dependent, not distance-dependent. A car driven 3,000 miles a year and a car driven 15,000 miles a year absorb roughly the same moisture into the brake fluid over the same period, because the moisture doesn't come from braking, it comes from the air, migrating slowly through rubber hoses, through the reservoir seal, through the system's unavoidable contact with the atmosphere. Honda says inspect every 3 years, replace as needed. Toyota says replace every 2 years. Volkswagen, BMW, most European manufacturers specify annual inspection with replacement at 2 years or sooner based on test results. These numbers are in owner's manuals, in the maintenance section, the section most people open once to find the roadside assistance number and then close. There's a specific scenario that concentrates the risk more than any other. Mountain driving. A long descent. 20 minutes of intermittent braking to manage speed. Heat building in the rotors, transferring through the calipers into the fluid. Sustained, accumulated, invisible heat. The kind that flat terrain driving never generates. A highway patrol officer in Colorado who has worked mountain corridor incidents for 14 years described a pattern he's seen enough times to recognize. We get calls from drivers who say the brakes just stopped working. No warning, no noise, the pedal went soft. By the time we arrive, everything tests fine. The system cooled down. The fluid returned to liquid state. There's nothing mechanically wrong. Nothing mechanically wrong. Picture that. A driver on a grade, vehicle moving, pedal traveling toward the floor. The strange and terrifying absence of response. And then, minutes later, in the calm of a runoff lane or a pull-off, everything working again. The system recovered. The fluid cooled. The vehicle tests fine. The driver remembers it forever. The people most at risk for this aren't performance drivers or people who abuse their cars. They're people who live in flat states and take one trip a year to visit family in the mountains. Their normal driving never reveals that the fluid is degraded. The mountains do. The cost to prevent this is not significant. The fluid itself runs $10 to $20 per bottle, depending on specification. A full flush at an independent shop, not a dealership, runs $70 to $100 in labor. A dealership will charge more, sometimes as part of a bundled service package priced to maximize the invoice rather than reflect what the engineering actually requires. The DIY version exists. It involves bleeding each caliper in sequence, requires 2 people, a bleeder wrench, and careful attention to avoid introducing air into the system while removing old fluid. For most drivers, 30 seconds of testing, followed by a $70 service at an independent shop, is the more reasonable path. Test first. Authorize based on results. Don't pay for the service if the strip says you don't need it yet. Do pay for it promptly if the strip says you do. That's the whole decision. Open the hood of your car. Near the firewall on the driver's side, closer to the windshield than to the engine, there's a small reservoir, white or yellow translucent plastic, roughly the size of a coffee mug. Brake symbol on the cap. You can see the fluid level through the wall without opening it. Look at the level first. If it's low, that's worth noting, but it may simply mean your pads are worn down. As pads thin, the calipers extend further and draw more fluid from the reservoir. Low level alone isn't an emergency, it's a signal to check pad thickness. Then, look up when the fluid was last changed. If you're like most people, if you bought this car used, or if you've had it maintained at a shop that doesn't test brake fluid, or if this is simply the first time anyone has asked you this question, the honest answer is probably that you don't know, which means assume it hasn't been done in recent memory. Buy the test strip. Open the cap carefully, avoiding any moisture contamination from your hands. Dip, wait 30 seconds, read the result. $3, 30 seconds. The result either gives you peace of mind for the next 6 months, or it tells you that the most important safety-related service your car currently needs costs less than an oil change and takes half the time. That's a different category than an air filter. The air filter affects fuel economy and engine efficiency over time. The brake fluid affects whether the pedal is firm or soft the next time conditions push harder than a normal Tuesday. You won't know which kind of day tomorrow is until you're in it. The fluid will know before you do.